So let's now bring in a political analyst and author, Justice Malala. He's author of The Plot to Save South Africa, joining us from New York. Justice, always great to chat to you, but from your perspective far away, do you see what's happened with this multi-party charter as a solidifying and a unification of the opposition, which I think is required to take on the ANC?
The solidification, it's always good to have principles, to have a little box and say, this is the box within which we play, Sally. But it's also, interestingly for me, it opens up the playing field. I think the biggest obstacle to this pact, to this coalition, is that can it get the magical 50% plus one? And if it can get that, whether at national level, whether at an easier to navigate province like Gauteng, then you begin to, then you have something to work with. Then on the day after election day and the 2 days after election day and the 14 days that you have to form a government, you have something to work with. What they've managed to do is open it up, keep the door open to an organization like the Patriotic Alliance and say, you can still come in and build One SA and your COPEs and ACDPs. So I think that is a key move on their part, and it keeps them in play, as it were.
So clearly it needs a lot more muscle, because at the moment, I think it's fair to say that the DA, IFP, Freedom Front Plus, and possibly Action SA, we've got to see how they do, are going to be doing most of the heavy lifting come next year's elections. I mean, the other parties, we know small parties can be significant, but really they're a blip at this point. We need a lot of those parties you've just mentioned to come on board, don't we?
No, absolutely. I mean, go out into the streets and say in Hyde Park, oh, are you going to vote for Spectrum? And people will look at you and say, what's Spectrum? Or the independent SANCO, what eNCA? I don't know those people. Those parties will be relatively insignificant in the election next year. And so the key parties, no matter how you finagle it, you play around with these numbers, you need a more convincing story that you're actually building an alternative to the ANC. And so you need to make it a little bit more open to other people. And I think that one of the successes of these talks over the past 2 days is that possibility exists, that others can come in and bolster the initiative that they're on. Otherwise, it's just a talk shop. Otherwise, it's just, Sally, we forget history and the fact that post-2016, post-2021 elections, there was a lot of talk about keeping the ANC out, out of municipalities and so forth. Those failed because there isn't enough numbers. And so, and then there's the other stuff about post-election talks. I think in this case, the fact that they began talking before the election is a huge success for them. It's a good pointer. And the fact that they are thinking that there is no need for arrogance and saying, oh, as the DA, we will get 40% and the rest will get 10% and we'll be home it will all be fine. It won't all be fine. And so that reality is something that's needed in these kinds of talks. The ANC is a powerful machine, and the ANC can get 48% or 46% and then build a coalition with the ACDP and others. And so this is a calculation that has to be top of mind.
Yeah, so they need more people to join them. Does this also solve a problem for a party like the Democratic Alliance, where some people might just feel they simply cannot, given the history of apartheid, vote for a white leader? it means, oh, well, I can be with a group of people who might have some muscle, but I don't have to vote for the DA. I can vote, say, for ASA, or I can vote for the IFP. Is that still a factor in our next election?
There is a very interesting part. One of the last announcements they made this afternoon was the fact that the DA most likely to become the biggest, to receive the most votes in the elections out of this pact. I mean, that the leader of that party, the one with the most votes in this formation, would be the leader of government business. If that were the case and the DA was that party, then John Steenhuisen would become the leader of government business in Parliament. In a way, Sally, it's quite a significant move in the sense that it's forming a prime ministership in South Africa, that it says it's okay to have a Velenkosini Hlabisa, or if Mangosuthu Buthelezi were to recover and so forth, that you would have a head of state, a president of the country, but you'd have a very powerful force in this leader of government business that would almost create a prime ministership that essentially runs the country. And so the issues of race, the issues of the DA and its history become somewhat obviated, became somewhat less of a factor, and someone like Peter Groenewald of the Freedom Front Plus, who said that South Africa is not ready for a white president, it would be, oh, maybe you've got Velenkosini Hlabisa, or maybe you've got Herman Mashaba, however that plays out. And then you've got a John Steenhuisen. Of course, you'd have your own problems and new problems arise.
It's fascinating because in a way it harks back, or it could hark back, to the government of national unity and a sense of, guys, we've got to share. That's the only right way to continue and to get rid of our past. And it's interesting that it's not just the ANC that this grouping has said they're against and they will not vote with in any coalitions that may be formed after the elections. They've emphatically said the EFF as well. And the EFF, as we know, is a populist party, says things that tend to polarize people. Do you think it is a wise strategy, though, to nail their colours to their mast about the EFF at this point, because the EFF is a very powerful player and could do extremely well come next year?
The EFF could do extremely well, but the EFF, at the going, whatever projection you look at, even the EFF's own projections, which they've spoken about publicly, the EFF will not be the center of any coalition agreement. It would be the second player, so it would be the ANC getting 38% in Gauteng, for example, the EFF coming on with a 13% and being 50% plus one. But what it does is add to the ANC Veterans League, for example. You remember Snooki Zigalala saying a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, that we need to review our association with the EFF. Panyaza Lesufi saying, yes, we're prepared to do that. You have to tell us if you want us to do that to the national structure. So within the ANC itself, there are people who say, what are we doing with the EFF, and so forth and so forth. So in a way, the EFF is being isolated, not just outside of the ANC, within the ANC itself, with people like the Veterans League saying, we don't understand why we don't share values with the EFF, and why are we doing this? So the EFF is the big, in a way you see the center coalescing, and the EFF is to the populist, many of us have said fascist left, and even the ANC center finds the EFF unpalatable. So you have a play there, and that opens up the possibility, Sally, of the fear of the FF plus, the fear of Herman Mashaba and Action SA, that there is another coalition that could work out, and it's an ANC-DA grand coalition. And I wouldn't you know, if these numbers come out next year, I wouldn't rule it out despite the existence of this pre-election.
I mean, that was what I wanted to ask you, because by the wording of today's agreement, I was going to say surely this shuts the door for the DA on any working relationship with the ANC. Because it says we will not vote for any member of the ANC or the EFF in a coalition. Does that shut the door forever or not?
You know, this is the point where we start going back to James Bond and spy movies and never say never again. You know, using the word never, if you remember after the 2021 local elections, Herman Mashaba, you know, tossed the word never around quite a bit. And it paints you into a corner. I think the DA is very aware that a huge chunk of its constituency, and I speak of the DA only, not the other parties, a huge chunk of its constituency would say, do you want a South Africa where the investment climate, where the social, economic climate is muddied hugely by an EFF that pushes the ANC towards a more radical agenda? And they would say many of our constituents, particularly in business, particularly in the more central parts of the political alignment, would say you need to do something to save the country, and part of it is jumping into bed with the ANC. So I don't think the door is closed to such a coalition. And I don't think Peter Groenewald or Herman Mashaba and their parties, who are the significant players here. Remember that the IFP has said, you can't tell me before an election that I shouldn't be contemplating getting in with the ANC. So there's one party in this formation that's already said, you know, I could play, but let's see how we. My first option is you guys, but if it comes to it, I'm ready to talk to the other people. And so I don't think the DA has shut the door on that at all. As Peter Groenewald has pointed out, there are 14 or more instances when DA leaders have touted the idea of working with the ANC, and I don't think that's just stuff that's in the air. I think it's a real consideration.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point you make. A united front at this point. We know the devil is always in the details, and when it gets down to the brass tacks of working out how to share power, that's when egos and personalities and differences come out. Not even across parties, but sometimes even within parties, as we've seen at local government level. So interesting times ahead, I would say. Thank you so much. Always great to chat to you, political analyst and author of The Plot to Save South Africa, Justice Malala, joining us from New York this evening.